Gentlemen, we're going to call this informational meeting for the House Urban Affairs Committee to order. First, the order of business will be the roll call. Would you like to call the roll?
I would, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay.
Chairman Petri?
Here.
Corbin? Here. Cox? On leave. Culver? On leave. Helm? On leave. Kaufman? On leave. Jerry Knowles? Harry Lewis?
Present.
John McGinnis? Thomas Mert? On leave. Chris Ross? On leave. Greg Rothman? On leave. Santora?
Here.
Simmons? On leave. Wieland? On leave. White? On leave. Chairman Caltagirone? On leave. Boyle? Brown? Cook Artis? Dawkins? Deasy? On leave. Farina? Gainey? On leave. Kim? On leave. Nielsen?
Here.
Schweier? On leave.
Thank you. For the members and the audience, there are a number of hearings today around the state, and because members are on multiple committees, it makes it difficult for them to be in two places at one time. In fact, a couple of our members may have to leave early because there's a hearing down the road on gaming. We're going to start with a self-introduction, and then we're going to go to opening remarks. So I'm going to have some opening remarks, and I know my colleague, Representative Nielsen, will have some opening remarks, and then we'll turn it over to Representative Lewis for opening remarks. Then we'll get into the testimony. We do have slated testimony in time, but that's really for a benchmark. Don't feel constrained that we're going to hold you strictly to that time period. So without further ado, why don't we start with opening comments, indicate where you're from, and if you want some of your background that may help the audience understand. We'll start with Representative Santora.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Jamie Santora. I am a representative from Delaware County, the 163rd District. My background was for many years in real estate development. Actually, one of my former colleagues I see out in the audience there, Mike Trio. Hello, Mike. We worked together at O'Neill Properties in King of Prussia for many years. I did development work from as far down as Florida, but primarily in the Northeast corridor, and got a lot of interest in what's being discussed here today with development and blight and everything else. So look forward to this hearing.
Representative Knowles, thank you for appearing. Would you like to give the audience some background on yourself?
Yes, it's great to be here, Mr. Chairman. A little bit of a problem finding it, but it's great to be here. I was a former borough councilman, borough mayor, county commissioner, and recognize the issue that we're dealing with here today and how important it is, and I look forward to the testimony of the testifiers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Representative Nielsen.
I'm Representative Ed Nielsen. I'm out of Philadelphia County. I'm a former councilman of the city of Philadelphia, and I'll use this as my time just to open up a little bit.
Okay, fine.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, this way we don't have to come back. Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with Representative Lewis, because some of the issues that he sees on the blight is some of the issues we see in Philadelphia. People losing their jobs, and the homes becoming vacant, banks owning it from out of the state, and no way to get in touch with them, and there they are just sitting there rotting away, and making a nuisance for the neighbors and the community as a whole. It's something that weekly Representative Lewis and I talk about on the House floor on what we've done in the city and how he can help his city along to fight these issues. And I'd like to also compliment the chairman for bringing this hearing to the communities itself, because many times we see and we watch PCN or we watch the TV and we see all these hearings being done inside Harrisburg, but it's better that we have inside the community and we're able to walk through other people's community, as we did with Representative Lewis yesterday, how he had us tour and actually see the issues themselves, because not every community faces the same thing as his community. And it's something that we have to do as representatives of the Commonwealth to get to know each other a little better and to work together in a bipartisan manner. And it's been a pleasure serving with him, and I look forward to doing it some more, and I look forward to a good hearing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
My name is Kurt Bellman. I'm with the Democratic staff of the committee. I'm a research analyst. I grew up in Minority Chairman Caltagerone's district, although I now live in Lancaster County.
Thank you. I'm Scott Petri. I'm chairman of the Urban Affairs Committee, also chairman of the Ethics Committee. My district is in Bucks County, and in an area that has faced some blight as well. I'll come back to some of the issues that we're working on, but blight, in the end, is something you know when you see. And when we took the tour yesterday, and by the way, thank you for all the hosts and the information, it was fascinating to see. Sometimes you can see blight from the outside, and sometimes it's more on the inside as well. But because of the 2008 economy, a lot of communities have faced vacant properties, which is really what we're talking about. Absentee owners, blatant code violations, properties that fall into disuse. And the issue of reuse of buildings, restoration of buildings becomes really critical. So my background is I've been an attorney, a graduate of Villanova Law School, and I have to tell those in the audience, it was like a welcome home tour yesterday, because I'm a graduate of Downingtown High School, 1978. So when and my wife and I lived our first year of marriage in Exton, but for the time period from 1978 to about 1985, I was in the community. I lived here for a time period. I was always a taxpayer because I had jobs. I worked at the Exton Mall. I was in and out of Downingtown. Somebody asked me how often we got to Coatesville. Remember, there's a strong rivalry. So not too often, but certainly competed against Coatesville regularly in athletics and always enjoyed the competition. I'm sorry, it was off. So I want to thank personally Representative Lewis for inviting the committee to come. Seeing things firsthand on the tour yesterday was extremely helpful, especially as we hear your testimony. We'll have a better idea of the issues you're trying to deal with, the specific conditions that exist. And we saw 3 communities that have some of the same problems and some different problems. So I'm anxious to hear the testimony. I'll have some more opening remarks in a moment, but let's finish the introductions. Representative, well, why don't we go with you? Okay. So we'll continue on to Representative Corbin.
Good morning. I'm State Representative Becky Corbin. I represent the 155th District, which is in central Chester County, east, west Brandywine, Euclid, Upper Euclid, all the way up to Spring City, including the borough of Spring City. So I'm very interested in hearing a lot of the information we're going to have today so I can relate it back to my constituents in Spring City Borough and see what is applicable to that area as well. I've lived in the Downingtown area almost 4 decades, so I'm very familiar with Downingtown, Coatesville area as it has had its ups and downs over the years. I'm originally from the western part of the state in a steel town, so Coatesville looks very familiar to me, as Johnstown did at one point. But thank you for all being here this morning, and I look forward to learning a lot about the different projects we talked about yesterday on the tour. Thank you.
Okay, I'll recognize Christine Goldbeck next.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you. I'm Christine Goldbeck, and I'm the Executive Director of the House Urban Affairs Committee for the Republican Caucus. It's great to see all of you here.
Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee. I really appreciate this opportunity, and it's a situation where all the communities can't come to Harrisburg, so we're bringing Harrisburg to the community this morning to hear all of the issues and make that connection so we can work together and accomplish our goals in each community. We started this, I'm very proud to be representative for the 74th District. It's a long district and quite deep and goes down towards the southern Chester County. So we are a large district serving about 63,000 people. What we would like to do, once we get there, just have everybody communicate. This is a friendly gathering. And just to give you some background as to where we started yesterday, we began our tour in Downingtown to see the proposed train station development site, which includes mixed-use space and parking. We were joined by Borough Manager Steve Sullins, President of the Main Street Association, Steve Plogger, President of the Borough Council, Chip Gazzari, and we also had an opportunity to tour the Chester County Airport, one of the busiest general airports in Pennsylvania. And we wanted to look at their recent renovations and also to see the vision of expansion of the airport, including hopefully a tower to minimize safety concerns with hoovering and aircraft traffic in the area. That includes Sikorsky with their testing of their helicopters. The committee was joined by Gary Hudson, Airport Manager, Al Koenig, Chairman of the Airport Authority, Rich Saylor, Member of the Airport Authority, and David Jones, Consultant. And for those that did not know, the airport in Chester County, the Geo Carlson Airport, serves more air traffic than Lancaster and Reading put together. So we are a busy, busy airport, and we need to help them, to help our community, because we are the next best thing to the Philadelphia International Airport. So that is very, very significant. We had a great tour of Coatesville to highlight the train station project, Route 82 and Route 30, that expansion, and the gateway or the corner of Route 82 and Route 30. Legend Properties, they helped us with the tour. The tour included a visit to the old Lipkins Furniture, where we were able to see the Franklin Lloyd Wright stairs, that historical site, and they're going to transfer those stairs to one of the new sites to maintain that dignity of history. We had a brief tour of the Cultural Society, the old First National Bank building, and a brief visit to the Iron and Steel Museum to see the Lukens steel that was recovered from the Twin Towers in New York City. We were joined by City Council President Linda Lavender Norris, City Manager Mike Trio, Jim DePetris, and Jack Corcoran of Legend Properties, Colleen Terry and her staff from Enon Partners, and Andrew Witter of Capital Associates. We also had a great tour of Parksburg to see the issues and concerns the borough has with bringing back revitalization to that borough, and also to see some beautiful, beautiful success stories of buildings that have been restored to their former glory. We were joined by Jack Assetto of the business community and Jim Thomas, Borough Manager. And briefly, we talked with Reverend Mark Bideman of the Parksburg United Methodist Church. That's a brief overall. We did not get a chance to get some of the communities because of time restraints, but ladies and gentlemen, I cannot emphasize how important this meeting is to the revitalization and reconnection to state government for the communities in this area. I'm proud that we were able to get here. We can't reach every community, but the Urban Affairs Committee, of which, of course, I'm a member, we sort of really wanted them to come to see what was happening here in our community, and that happened. At this time, and we're privileged to be here in Coatesville, and if I could introduce, Mr. Chairman, with your approval, the City Manager President for the City of Coatesville and President of City Council, Mrs. Linda Lavender Norris. If you don't mind, if you would take a brief seat at the table here and tell us about us coming to your city and make a brief comment.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Linda Lavender Norris, City Council President, and it's with great pleasure I welcome you all here this morning. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for your interest and your willingness to assist all of our communities to come together as one and move forward. With Blight being the focus and acknowledging that Blight is a silent influence and it could be negative. This is positive coming out of it. So it could be a negative, but I'm grateful today to say that it's positive. I thank you for your interest. Thank you for coming out and look forward to working with you soon. And on behalf of the city of Coatesville, welcome.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank you for hosting us. Oh, do you have some more? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman, but I did want to make a point and state, if you would observe and look at this committee, I am so proud to have such bipartisan support
Yes.
with Representative Nelson here. My friends, we eat out often, so we kind of know each other. Absolutely. We won't tell you what our favorite dish is at a certain restaurant. But I want to show that we are very serious about the revitalization and the rebuilding of the communities in the 74th District. We are working hard. We don't want to have you think that you're talking on deaf ears. It's a process. And right now, we are in the middle of the process of succeeding. And this is a part of that process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative, and I'm going to actually just bully pulpit right on that last topic. It is a process, and as I was about to say, I want to thank you for hosting us and the informative tour that we had yesterday. What I noticed about you in particular and others in the group that will testify are the passions you have for your communities. It's clear that you have a vision, that you intend to execute on that vision. And the other thing that I would share, if you don't mind, that you and I talked about in particular was the need that we work together collaboratively. You can't get it done without us. We can't get it done without the federal government in some cases. And all of us need to be pulling in the same direction on that or we're just going to go in circles. And the legislative process for the audience is very interesting. I've been on this committee I'm in my 14th year, so as a first term, second term, third term, I was on this committee. What happens is we'll examine an issue like we are today, a blight. We pass legislation that moves the ball forward, but we always have to revisit. And what we find are that some of the tools that we provide to local communities to address the issue work for a period of time. They work for some, they don't work for all. So if you look at generally the legislative process, originally we started with bills like Main Street and Elm Street. And they're great programs, but you have to have matching dollars and it doesn't work everywhere. And it's not always just Main Street and Elm Street that are suffering from blight. Then we came back and we dealt with absentee owners in conservatorship, the Blight Act, and land banks. And I'm going to come back to the information on those bills in a moment. I think it's important that community leaders know what tools are available under those acts because they're fairly recent. This term, we're dealing with expedited foreclosures on vacant and abandoned land. What we found is that many times these properties sit for years in the foreclosure process, which prohibits your ability to deal with those properties. We also dealt with shortening the time period on quiet title actions for certain smaller properties so that you don't have to wait 21 years while the property sits there to figure out who the ultimate owner is going to be. And the other piece, which is really moving through the Senate, is a cultural and historic district bill. The idea that you need to have public-private partnerships with your cultural and historic museum resources today There's not enough governmental funding for those organizations. So let me just give you some of the detail, and then we'll get right into the testifiers. Act 135 of 2008 deals with conservatorship. Community members may petition the Court of Common Pleas to become a conservator of a blighted property. If the court grants the conservatorship, you take control of that blighted and abandoned property and make the repairs necessary to return the property to productive use. The conservator could be a local government group, may borrow money, incur debt, and fulfill its role as a conservatorship. As conservator, you must maintain, safeguard, and insure the property and develop and implement a final plan for abatement of nuisance conditions. An annual status report to the court and parties to the action is required, and the court may request updates more than once a year. We also dealt with the Blight Act, Act 90 of 2010, and that places responsibilities on eyesores on owners instead of on the public. It requires local government to take action against the owner. It's a powerful tool that local government can use to force owners to either fix up or pay up or both. In other words, it's a tool that you have to enforce some of your zoning laws. Obviously, there's a local resource cost to that kind of action, but it has been found to be very helpful. We also passed Act 153 of 2012, and that creates land banks. A land bank focuses on the conversion of vacant, abandoned, and tax delinquent properties into productive use. They can be pivotal in making property redevelopment more efficient and affordable, and for reserving land for targeted purposes under local policy and planning goals. Land banks also clear title to the properties they acquire, and this is meaningful because clouded titles cause significant delays and costs to real estate transactions. Act 153 applies to every county, every city, borough, township, and incorporated town with a population of 10,000 or more, or 2 or more municipalities with populations less than 10,000 that enter into an intergovernmental cooperative agreement to establish a land bank. And we talked about in the current session how the House Urban Affairs Committee reported out unanimously House Bill 773, which provides for acquisition of real property by adverse possession through an action in quiet title after 10 years. Current law on all properties is 21 years other than properties that fit within this category. And those are properties 1/2 acre or less. So that should be another tool that would enable you to establish ownership of properties. Without further ado, why don't we get into our first testifier. We have Dave, and I'm going to butcher your last name, but I'll try. Sciocchetti? Sciocchetti, that's easy. I'm sorry. Chester County Economic Development. So the floor is yours. Take us through the process and the difficulties you're dealing with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Pennsylvania House Urban Affairs Committee. Welcome to Chester County, to the 74th District, and the city of Coatesville. We are very pleased that you are here today to listen to testimony about the issue of blight and its negative impact on communities in Pennsylvania. My role today is to kind of set the stage. You're going to hear from a lot of people who are dealing with the issues of blight. I want to talk a little bit about blight, what it is, and how it manifests in communities. As you're certainly aware, blight's a serious problem facing many communities in Pennsylvania. Blight has been defined by the American Planning Association in their policy guide on public redevelopment as underperforming or obsolete land uses or buildings that exist where the rational private investment cannot overcome market forces. Very technical. For a less technical definition, everybody these days uses Wikipedia. Wikipedia describes urban decay and urban blight as the process whereby a previously functioning city or part of a city falls into disrepair and decrepitude. I like that word for some reason. At its heart, blight is a response to changing economic realities. It is a process of disinvestment. Areas and neighborhoods that were stable gradually become unstable. Jobs leave an area, and there's less demand for homes in that area. Values decline, houses deteriorate. There is less interest in the area, and a downward spiral is underway. All of that is a good description of Blight in a textbook manner, but I will tell you that it is too antiseptic and too clinical to describe the reality of Blight to those who are experiencing it, both individuals and communities. Blight is a disease on the community. It is insidious in how it seems minor at the outset, but grows into something that changes whole neighborhoods. It can start for different reasons and manifest in many ways. At the macro level, Blight can begin when the economy of an area starts to move in a negative direction. Companies start to leave, and they are not replaced. Empty buildings start to appear. Those with an ability to relocate begin to do so. Those left behind struggle with a new negative dynamic. At the micro level, Blight might start with a homeowner who loses their job, or it might be someone with an underwater mortgage. It could be a prolonged illness. It can be anything that limits the homeowner's ability and desire to care for their home. It might start with high grass and weeds. It can move to peeling paint and broken windows. Leaks can start to damage the structure. At some point, the owner abandons the property. It may or may not be subject to bank foreclosure proceedings, depending on what it's worth. It becomes tax delinquent. It does not sell at tax sale. It may or may not be sold at judicial sale. It is vandalized. Copper is removed from the building. It becomes home to vermin and may be used for criminal activity. It continues to deteriorate until it must be demolished as a public safety issue. The local community may or may not have the funds to demolish it. While this process of the individual property is unfolding, the adjacent properties are experiencing a decline in the value of their properties. They may have problems getting property insurance. They begin to question whether they should continue to live there. People on the block are concerned that nothing is being done to address the problem of the deteriorating property. They may decide to sell now before their property value declines. Investors see an opportunity and start to buy at discount. They often seek to reassess the property to a lower value. The entire neighborhood is now under siege by the forces that contribute to blight. The community as a whole now has a problem neighborhood that can exert negative influences on the entire community. It can now be perceived as less desirable to new residents and new businesses. Now, while not every community that experiences blight will develop the full set of outcomes described above, variations of this sequence of events have played out in many Pennsylvania communities. Too often, the community does not recognize the problem until it has reached an advanced state. Equally likely, the community does not have the funds, manpower, or tools to address the problem in a meaningful way. While Pennsylvania has taken many steps to create new tools, Chairman Petri described some of them, and options for dealing with blight, there is certainly more that can be done. Today, you will hear from a range of individuals who are battling blight in large ways and small, from code enforcement to the use of incentive programs to responding to foreclosures. Communities in Chester County and the 74th District are engaged in a range of activities to combat blight. We hope that you will find the testimony today helpful as you work to identify legislative responses to the challenge of blight. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you here today. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any members have questions? Looks like Representative Santora.
Thank you for testifying today. We are looking into a lot of things continually in Harrisburg. We have a lot of blight bills, as Chairman Petri had said, coming before our committee, and they're taken very seriously. In fact, Christine, what's the official name of that committee? The Blight Task Force, or? So that's something that I've been involved in now because of a bill that I was very involved in that just went through the House. You're absolutely right. We've got to be able to give you the tools from the state level on certain items. One of the things that I see is, and this is one of the things our bill just addressed, was that things happen when a property's ready to close. And it's been a real problem because what it does a lot of the time is prevent it. And it's the only time that you as a municipality seem to have certain authorities that you can get things done. And we've got to give you those tools ahead of time so that you can go after it before it does become a problem, like you said. You start seeing the lawns growing big or high, and then all of a sudden a property's empty, then the next one's empty. You got to realize it at that point in time and have the resources to be able to address the issue. Another issue I find is that we've got an issue with district judges, not picking on them, but they slap people with a $25 fine and they laugh and go back and do nothing about their property. So we've got to start holding some feet to the fire there as well in order to be able to prevent that. So I thank you for your testimony. I think it was very insightful.
Representative Corbin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Cicchetti, for your testimony. I know from our past experience, we've had a lot of conversations about the Keystone Opportunity Zone, and I wanted to know if you would comment on the success of the KOZ in battling blight here in Chester County or other places, and is there anything we can do to improve on that program?
Within Chester County, I'll give you the best example of how a KOZ has contributed to economic success. In Lower Oxford Township, Tasty Cake had a plant, and they were contemplating moving that plant out of state. We put together a team with the state government and local governments, and we identified the KOZ as a tool for an adjacent piece of property, and we were able to use that tool to convince Tasty Cake to stay, Flowers Foods, I should say, that's the corporate name. And they added about 90,000 square feet and added, I think at this point, well in excess of 100 jobs when it could have been another vacant, empty warehouse-type building. And I will tell you, if you do get the chance to go down there, the Tasty Cake property, the manufacturing process for baking bread is extremely interesting. It's a great tour. In a prior incarnation, I spent a long time working in the city of Chester, and the Keystone Opportunity Zone was an extremely successful tool there. We took an abandoned power plant on the waterfront that had been sitting there for 20 years vacant. And someone mentioned Brian O'Neill. Mike O'Neill, his brother, was the developer who came and said, that's not an empty power plant, that's 400,000 square feet of Class A office space. And using the KOZ and some other incentives, we were able to turn that building literally from a contaminated property with PCBs and other problems into really an amazing office building. So it's a tremendous tool. Now, I will tell you, it doesn't work everywhere. You have to be able to find an economic use for the property, and that's the biggest challenge. But it does create an incentive to go places where developers might not otherwise go. So I think that certainly we've used it effectively in a number of situations. I think it's a great opportunity to drive development to where it needs to go, which is usually what happens in these distressed communities. They're distressed because economics has moved away from them. And a KOZ can be a tool that drives it back to that community and slows and maybe halts the process of decline that's associated with blight.
Thank you. That's exactly the explanation I was looking for. Thanks.
I want to thank you for your testimony. One other thing I think we ought to all be cognizant about that would help Pennsylvania tremendously, and that would be the availability of cheap energy. When you talk about these plants, the game changers that we see around the Commonwealth are where facilities can get cheap energy available. They not only stay, they expand. And so I think it becomes incumbent upon us at the state level to try and figure out how to deliver this asset we have in the ground in Pennsylvania to Pennsylvanians for their use. Take the Lukens property as just an example. I'll call it the former Lukens property to be technical. If that steel plant, that operator would have cheap energy available to it, it could expand its operations dramatically. It's interesting, in my own local town, there's been a property that was been abandoned for probably 12 to 15 years while they tried to get their development approvals, going to Representative Santora's previous comment about sometimes we need to cooperate a little better and figure out how to move things along. And every survey of the community said, what do you think the primary use of this property should be? And invariably, it always came back to what it was, which was a car dealership. And the car dealership went under because of all the plethora of problems that Pontiac and other dealers had. But in the end, everybody thought that it should be a car dealership. And like the Lukens property, you know, I'm looking at it thinking yesterday as we're doing the tour, boy, that could be a this, that could be a that. We find out the new owner has restrictions on what they'll allow to go in there, which may not be fair to the community leaders who are trying to redevelop that property, but is the reality of the economics. And so how do they advance their plans of restoring Coatesville, making things better, when they have an owner that's compliant but doesn't really want to allow opportunities? We have this in the Fairless Hills plant in my area. There have been thousands of people who had ideas of how they would use the property, but U.S. Steel has been able to block it. So that becomes another little issue. Again, to make the point, if you had cheap energy, though, maybe its former use could be a use again. And what a shot in the arm that would be for Coatesville and creating jobs. So I want to thank you for what you do. Your role is important. Most businesses have no idea where to go when they want to develop a property. Those that are watching at home, your local economic development council is the place to start so that you can find the properties and identify how you want to proceed. So we'll go to our next panel, which I believe is the City of Coatesville, Michael Trio, City Manager, and Sonia Hunsinger, Economic Development Advisor. Welcome, and you may proceed when you're ready.
You want that one?
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Michael Trio. Pleasure meeting everybody yesterday on the tour. It was very interesting and helpful to us. I'm here this morning to talk to you this morning about the challenges and the opportunities facing the City of Coatesville, including our current and planned efforts to address, manage, and eliminate blight in our community. As City Manager and Executive Director of the Coatesville Redevelopment Authority, I'm also a certified land planner, and I've been between public service and private sector business, about 30 years of experience. This has been experience has been important in understanding how to balance the needs and constraints of the city and its taxpayers with the need to constantly work to attract new revenue, development, and jobs here. I'm also responsible for the day-to-day management of the city operations, functions, including overseeing staff, budgeting, accounting practices, enforcement, utilities, external communications, and guiding land development activities. So it's a busy town, and we're really trying to move forward with all these activities. My planning and development experience is an asset when I'm working closely with City Council and local development agencies and stakeholders such as Sonia to develop programs and systems to advocate for the attraction and reinvestment to the city, as well as supporting plans to nurture existing business and community organizations. Our opportunities. At first glance, it may be difficult to see Coatesville's distress and its plate as one of the Commonwealth's most distressed municipalities and most in need of revival. The city has a strong manufacturing and industrial heritage, and we have experienced in our heyday in the mid-60s and 70s. Like many of the Commonwealth's older core communities, the industries that once fueled the city's economic engine, steel, heavy manufacturing, fabrication, are no longer present or limited in the city. And the decline of the city's core industries led to the corresponding decline in housing stock, residency, homeownership, and resources available to fund basic needs such as education, public works, and infrastructure improvements, all challenges that we have daily in the city. This lack of resources is visible in the deteriorating condition of much of the city's housing and commercial stock. Not much new construction has occurred in the city for many decades. There's been some projects through the city in the last 10 years or so, but it's very limited. Similarly, redevelopment of the city's existing buildings and properties is stagnant. One may look at the city's present physical and social conditions and write off the future as hopeless. However, where others see blight as decline, I see opportunity for revival, reinvestment, and revitalization. Coatesville is the only city in Chester County, one of the county's most affluent counties in the country. We are surrounded by some of the wealthiest individuals and communities in the Commonwealth and in the nation. With some careful planning, bold vision, and outside investment, Coatesville can revive its productive past once again and become an important link in the chain of redevelopment in Chester County. Our city offers a great opportunity to showcase the commitment of the county and state in reinvesting in this hidden gem. By putting legislative and financial tools into the hands of the city and its leadership that can be used to rebuild the city's infrastructure, create jobs, and help Coatesville become self-sustaining and vibrant again. Another comment about the city, our city has great bones. The statement is a common thread through discussions I've had with many people, many sectors. The industrial history, architectural character, building scale, and construction materials were built to last. Coatesville is a textbook walkable community. The grid streets and connectivity to all portions of the city is a great advantage for complementary mixed uses, service businesses, and residential development. Utility services exist, very, very important in redevelopment, and are in close proximity to the properties that they service, resulting in low cost of connections and construction. The city has created a system of public parks and facilities, public pools, which are now uncommon in many of municipalities of our size. We have a density of 7,300 persons per square mile, and these facilities are important, and the city feels it is important to maintain and expand to serve our residents. This also prevents an obvious first wave of reinvestment opportunities that will help retain existing residents and attract new residents to invest, live, work, and play in our community. Coatesville is very fortunate to be located directly on the Keystone Corridor. Some of our problems, as mentioned before, the blight has resulted from deferred maintenance due to lack of human and capital resources, overburdening and inconsistent building and development controls that have happened over the years, filling the gap with local match requirements for programs like community development block grant money. It's very difficult for the city to match the required funds to do projects. Therefore, we usually have a shortfall, and it's difficult in finding either development entities or other sources of public money to fill those gaps. Some of the things we've done in the city and what's on the horizon, the projects that are to your left, my right, along the side wall of the room indicate are projects that are currently underway, either in planning or starting planning. The 3rd Street train station project, which is the major PennDOT project that we witnessed in our tour yesterday between 3rd and 4th Avenues, just south of the existing Conrail tracks. That'll be an $85 million investment ultimately by the state and the city, provide a new train station, about a 600-car parking structure, and various opportunities for development either through private sector or possibly institutional uses. The DEPG Legend Properties was mentioned earlier in the introduction. This is a $25 million reinvestment by Legend Properties at the intersection of Route 82 and Lincoln Highway. That is augmented by about a $1.2 million public project to reconstruct the intersection at First and Lincoln. So that's a significant public investment that the city has committed to for the project. The project will create about 100 new jobs, raise the city's tax base, and demonstrate a visible sign of faith in the city's revitalization. The project would not be possible without the infusion of state funding due to a large gap in market rate versus rent versus the cost of redevelopment. Projects like this are not possible without public-private partnerships and public subsidies, unfortunately. The city is participating through involvement in the redevelopment authority through its own to convey properties, through eminent domain proceedings, and enable the intersection parking structures to be built on time and with the support of the grant applicants, a true public-private partnership. There's also opportunities with the city redevelopment authority. The RDA owns and manages a land and building portfolio and continues to market sites, including the former Geo Carlson site, commonly known as the Flats, which is at the northwest intersection of First Avenue and Lincoln Highway. This site is the largest land area and identified as our biggest potential opportunity for major economic impact. There has been a series of projects proposed that due to the economic conditions of the mid-2000s, were unable to move forward. The city has considered a series of potential uses which require stacking of public resources. About 45,000 square feet of downtown commercial space, which provide a level of stability to the market and the opportunity for the local businesses to grow, are also managed by the Redevelopment Authority. Through local economic development and marketing programs expanding the city, in the city spearheaded by the Second Century Alliance. Out-of-the-box revenue are things that the city is looking at to augment other ways to be more entrepreneurial and bringing more activity and revenue to the city. We are using our currently owned assets and sharing services that could be a win-win for the city. An example is the relocation of the Coatesville Magisterial District Justice Court to City Hall, hopefully within this year, which will provide a foundation for the needed capital improvements not only to the district court facilities but also to City Hall, and allow some win-win on revenue production for the city. 30-year-old City Hall building and developing is up-to-date, efficient court facility, implementing innovation and intermunicipal cooperation in energy programming and green sustainable projects. It was mentioned earlier the importance of energy projects. The city has entered into a standstill agreement with a company which will be developing an energy farm on one of our properties along Route 82. So that's in process. Expansion of recreation and cultural activities to attract interest in and become a magnet to urban live, work, and play lifestyles. Concerts, parades, and the proposed Coatesville Vintage Auto Grand Prix are an example of these programs unfolding in the city. So the city's working hard to market themselves and to provide an open opportunity for new business. What we have implemented, we sort of canned a term called green tape. No more red tape in approvals and process, green tape. In fact, I heard last night it should probably be no tape. But we do regular outreaches to the representatives of real estate management groups, developers, and businesses to keep organizations updated through these outreach and meeting processes. There's local organizations such as the Housing Association that we do meet with, and others on an as-needed basis. We've started regular staff plan development review meetings with developers and entities looking to redevelop in the city, and that's one of the cases where we're turning red tape into green tape. We've upgraded and enhanced code enforcement management, including analysis and cataloging of vacant and dilapidated and abandoned structures. That's where our next stage of implementing, hopefully, these programs to either acquire, demolish, or find better use for those properties. We've streamlined our land development zoning process to identify and prevent unknown roadblocks to the project. I think Representative Santora mentioned that. That's been a case where properties could go to closing. There could be a permit or an issue with DEP or one other issue that could come in and stop a project. Okay, what we need. I lost my last page there. Legislative actions to revise programs like CRIZ regulations to serve our population level and allow Coatesville to participate and leverage its future tax revenues to accelerate development. I think that's a population issue, and we would very much appreciate that being looked at. Streamlining agency communication, expedite permitting and construction in areas with PennDOT, with DEP and DCED, where coordination or communication between those agencies in the city would be expedited, would be very helpful. This will be provide realistic funding limits. As I mentioned earlier, provide realistic funding limits to allow for actual construction costs without shortfalls, local match funds, things like that. A quick clearinghouse process for state and local legislative enforcement of blight remediation and condemnation support for the city and the RDA, which many of the programs have been daylighted today. Align state building codes to meet current year standards under the UCC Act. Currently the regulations are inconsistent and not cycling together, so we have inconsistencies with permits, and folks who come into the city and want to do redevelopment, renovation of buildings have issues with code enforcement consistency. So with all that said, in conclusion, distressed municipalities such as Coatesville have all the ingredients of success at their fingertips. Solid infrastructure base, a population ready to be trained to work, access to public transportation, proximity to major markets. What we need are tools to enable us to leverage our assets in the most flexible way possible. That may mean relaxing regulations or opening up programs like CRIZ to more municipalities, streamlining onerous regulations and reviews, and allowing expedited reviews at DEP and other agencies, where many projects bog down and languish for months and years. Slowing development, additional funding programs that can be directed towards improving infrastructure in our downtowns, such as funding H2O, PennWorks, and the IFIP program. funding Keystone Communities, which was mentioned earlier, to its maximum level to do the most good for the most communities. A mouthful, but I think that the city is very appreciative of the work of the committee, and we thank you for being here today, and thank you. And any questions I can answer at this time.
Ms. Hunsinger, did you have a comment you wanted to make before we do questions? Why don't we do that?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this morning about investment in blighted properties and generally depressed communities. My name is Sonia Hunsinger, and I'm the Economic Development Administrator in Chester County's Department of Community Development. My focus area is the city of Coatesville, and I speak on behalf of the Coatesville Second Century Alliance, a group of community stakeholders representing both the public and private sectors, all deeply committed to enhancing and encouraging investment in the city of Coatesville. And I'm before you today to discuss some of the advantages that come from investment in blighted properties in distressed communities. As you're keenly aware, abandoned properties in both residential and commercial neighborhoods have significantly negative effects on not just adjacent properties, but entire neighborhoods as the broken window theory takes hold. Vacant and abandoned properties present overwhelming challenges to small, financially strapped communities like Coatesville. Vacant buildings dampen local economies, depress property values, set the stage for criminal and vagrant activity, and place significant cost burdens on local government. However, vacant properties can actually become opportunities, potential assets in neighborhood stabilization, downtown revitalization, and community growth initiatives as they become renovated and reoccupied. As members of this committee, you already know that real estate development and investment is trending back toward our urban cores. Developers may not recognize the monikers smart growth, new urbanism, or sustainable development, but they do recognize the national trends that are primarily driven by the millennial generation are shifting back to our walkable urban communities, environments where homes, jobs, and social networks are all in close proximity. In fact, AAA, the National Auto Association, reports a 23% decline in miles driven per year by drivers aged 16 to 34. This is a clear indicator that this generation prefers car-optional environments where public transit is available and alternative transportation can be supported and encouraged. This tees up an incredible opportunity for developers to invest in urban centers like Coatesville, where the public transit infrastructure is already in place and easily accessible. And it's these communities, like Coatesville, that are home to a concentration of vacant and abandoned properties, an inventory of potential sites ripe for redevelopment. Often owned by the municipality's redevelopment authority, these vacant and abandoned buildings offer more affordable acquisition costs to the developer, along with a willingness on the part of neighbors and local officials to support the private investment and improvements, thereby creating those public-private partnerships that support community development and neighborhood improvement. Equally attractive is the established infrastructure. Existing roads, sidewalks, and utility access significantly reduce development costs, and, as mentioned before, the public transportation systems are well established in urban communities. Developers that invest in blighted properties can find themselves on the ground floor of a community's revitalization and, in some cases, be the catalyst for a neighborhood's renaissance, spurring more development and ultimately increasing property values and the tax base and improving the overall quality of life. But even given the potential benefits of investing in the rehabilitation of these properties, the reality is that they don't always pencil out. Blighted properties can require extensive resources to bring them into code compliance. At the local level, municipalities can employ tax incentive programs such as LRTA and RETAP to encourage private development of these blighted properties, and the counties have tools at their disposal as well. Coatesville currently has a project, which you've seen yesterday, the DEPG Legend property, in the pipeline that is benefiting from a true public-private collaboration with the city, the county, and the developer, all working to ensure the project comes to fruition. It is, however, still reliant on other sources of capital, and applications have been made to the Commonwealth for assistance through the RACP program. This is just one example of the importance of the programs that Harrisburg can offer to ensure that our small urban centers throughout the Commonwealth have the tools such as Keystone Opportunity Zone, tax increment financing, historic tax credits, and CREZ to leverage with the private sector to encourage the redevelopment of these vacant and abandoned buildings. These tools, combined with programs like Keystone Communities, will give us the resources we need at the local level to address blight, enhance our communities, and ensure a prosperous future and improve quality of life for our residents. And thank you for your time and your interest.
Representative Knowles is recognized for some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't really go into, I don't even know that I mentioned the district that I represent. I represent the 124th Legislative District, which is a portion of Schuylkill, Berks, and Carbon County. When I was assigned to the Urban Affairs Committee, I kind of scratched my head because the largest community that I represent is the borough of Tamaqua. That's 7,000 people. The smallest community that I represent is the borough of Lenhartsville, which is 166 people. And the reason I say that is, as I'm looking through, I'm looking at Parksburg, which is somewhere less than 3,600, Coatesville, and I don't have any cities where I come from, but the city of Coatesville is 13,000 plus, and Colne Township is somewhere around 14,000. My point is that I quickly recognized that blight is not just a Philadelphia problem. It's not just a Reading problem. It's not just a Hazleton problem. It is a problem to many of these small communities that I represent. And I just, maybe everybody knew that, but I just wanted to get it onto the record. In terms of a question, Jamie had mentioned about district justices. We have made an effort, and by the way, the senator, my senator, Senator Dave Wargel, is like the champion of blight. I mean, this has been something that he has been focusing on for many, many years. And one of the things that we did is we met with the local DJs, with the local district magistrates, to impress upon them how bad this is. You know, this is not just something we can sweep under the rug. Yeah, I talk about the fact that I was a cop back in the 70s, and I remember in those days, people used to drive cars, and they would drive them into the ground, and then when they were done, they would just let them park, and then we would tow them away, and we would junk them. Well, that's what people are doing with houses today. That's what they're doing with houses. They get every buck that they can out of that property, and then they just let it go, and then we as taxpayers end up picking up the tab, and that's not fair. We need to hold property owners more accountable. Now, my question is, have you guys done anything in terms of meeting with the local DJs, without mentioning any names? What is their attitude in terms of this problem? Do they recognize the seriousness of this problem? And I know we're doing some things in terms of legislation with blight, but do we need to do more? And are they doing as much as they can? Boy, I'm really putting you on the spot.
Well, I've been here since August, Representative, and we started in-house. We really started in-house with our code enforcement department. There was issues that had to be addressed that were ongoing, and that's on our list to do, to go to the magistrate, and he'll be in-house with us here next year, and to impress on him to, make our fine stick. Because as you mentioned, we could have a property owner that has multiple dozens of violations. They'll pile them up and wait till they have a single hearing, and then the district justice may, the goal is compliance always, as you know. You want to get them to come into compliance. And if they can do that and not issue fines, it's well and good, I think. But I think that we have to be able to cover our expenses, because we do have staff, we do have properties that have to be maintained. And, people say, you get comments from certain constituents, well, let it go. We don't want, but that retards our ability to bring new business in and new people, because if we don't keep our city in good shape and enforce these regulatory requirements, then it's not going to be a good face. And so we're trying to do a balancing act where we meet with the groups that are in control of basically rental properties outside of our commercial district. But, homeowners, the same thing, and try to impress upon them that, to take pride in the city, and when we have to bring the hammer, for say, we could work with the magistrate and make sure that it gets implemented. So, it's an ongoing process. We have 2 DJs that service the city, and, you can't deal with the same personalities the same way, and I think that's something you have to feel as you go through that process. I hope I didn't create more questions than I answered.
No,
but-
if I may, Mr. Chairman, the point that I would make is the group that we put together in terms of every district justice in Schuylkill County, as well as some members, some local officials of smaller communities, we met with them. And quite honestly, they're pretty busy guys, and they're dealing, in many cases, with much more serious things than blight. And I think sometimes it can kind of get lost in the shuffle. But I will tell you that it was advantageous to everybody concerned that we sat down with them. And we got feedback from them, and they told us, hey, look, you may need to do this for us. And we would say to them, you need to take this a little more serious. But there's been a group put together, and it worked very well.
Okay.
And they've at least recognized the seriousness in terms of blight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And just to add to Representative Knowles, before we move off that topic, novel approach I saw in one of my own communities, the local district justice imposed the maximum fine and said, but if you make these corrections within 30 days and show me proof, I'll reduce it to the minimum amount. Going to your point, that a property owner has money for one of the two, paying the fines or fixing the properties, and this was a way to encourage it. I recognize Representative Santora.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. Mike, this town sounds a lot like the town we walked into many years ago of Conshohocken.
Yeah.
A lot of blight, didn't know where they were going to go, worried about money, didn't have the resources, and now Conshohocken's thriving. And the secret to Conshohocken was they allowed the developers to think outside the box.
Right.
And that is key here as well. You've got to let your real estate developers, they're the experts, think outside the box. It may not fit within what you're used to, and I say this with all care and love on it. It's what made Conshohocken successful. Conshohocken is plentiful with money at this point. They've got a lot of good development, a lot of new young families moving in, and in fact, they're now looking for more affordable housing because the values of what I would call little 1,100 square foot, 900 square foot row homes are now in the high 2s, high 3s, and even in the $400,000 marks. It's a good thing, and they're adjusting. They didn't lose sight on who they were, a mill town on a hill. They still have that, a lot of old families still there. But if there's anything I could say is let the developers do what they do. Let them think outside the box. And you've got to get your zoning team and everybody else to think outside the box. It's extremely important because they'll bring it to the table for you. They'll bring things that you're not expecting. And, walking trails and little things that don't cost a ton of money, but really make a difference. And I drove through the town this morning. I got here about an hour and a half early, and I just took a ride around to understand it a little better. And you've got a deep history, and you can sell that history. So I know you can do it, Mike, and your entire team, I'm sure, is.
Appreciate that.
So.
Representative Corbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike, one of the things you mentioned was filling the gap for local match requirements for community development block grants
Right.
and other grant opportunities. Can you comment on any, the status of what available funds there are and any progress that you're having in Coatesville for meeting some of those demands?
The two major, thank you for the question, the two major issues we have with matching funds are our projects right now at First and Lincoln is the intersection improvement. There's a CRP grant that was issued from the county of about $700,000. That project is about a $1.2 to $1.3 million project. So we have to identify follow-up money either through CRP, which we have applied for, or other opportunities either through, from the city standpoint, it's just from our general fund. We don't have any other opportunities to any matches. For the other public project that we're doing is the garage that will support the redevelopment of the business district. Once again, there's a CRP grant for that. Once again, short. It's a $500,000 grant. We're applying for a second grant, but the cost of that construction could be as high as over $2 million. So besides the possibility of infusion of private money, but as was mentioned earlier, the stacking of funds because of the investment level and the risk that needs to be taken by the private sector, there's always a gap. And we have to find a way through our legislation, I think, to really be realistic or target. Unfortunately, some municipalities, cities need it more than others. You know, and I think there may be some better sliding scale that would allow additional lesser match amounts for some of the more needy areas. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem. But you know, block grant money, same thing. There's very high matching requirements, up to 50% in some cases. To attract development, people want a clean, easily navigated city, well lit. You know, our sidewalk systems are in need. So those are the kind of things that you have to provide good public works, and repair those. The funding is not there at this time. So we're trying to find ways to get these programs. And people, many times you get a comment like, why don't you just go get the grant money? Well, the grant money is not free money. It's got a significant local match. So it's hard to say, well, we can't get the grant money because we can't get the grant. Well, people don't want to hear that. So it's for a constituency to hear that, they don't realize that there's a significant amount of general fund money or other tax money needed to either be raised in their taxes or somehow moved around in the budget to allow for that. So that's where I see a big gap in the matching fund. There's two examples I can think off at the top of my head.
Yeah, I appreciate that. What I'm hearing is more think outside the box as far as matching grants and the financial considerations or levels that need to be attained for you to be able to use the grant money.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And what we have done, that's why one of the reasons we are looking to do a project with the county, because there's where we have a public works project where we have shared facilities for a win-win, a county and a city operation, and there's an infusion of revenue that will help augment not only our building, but we have a citywide energy program. We're replacing all of our street lamps. So from a health, safety, welfare, that's all tied into that one project. And we were able to do a project with Johnson Controls to integrate building, street lighting, some additional video systems to support our police department. So we sort of brought all those entities together for a win-win on that. So there's sort of the innovative ways and out of the box ways I think the city's trying to move forward to.
Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a comment. And just listening and knowing what I know, and just looking at you, Mrs. Hunsinger and Mike, you're creating a powerful team here with the Second Century Alliance and the city of Coatesville. And I see you as expediting some of these programs that we're trying to implement. And I've heard Chris mention a couple of times in this type of thing. And we really have to talk about that, but it seems as though with the collaboration, I'm very proud that we have the two of you working together to sort of expedite some of the issues that we are talking about currently today. And we would like to continue the dialogue with the city and helping you or doing what we can to help but I see a strong revitalization and unity in this community. And I just wanted to make that statement, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, staff, go ahead.
I'm very interested in the programs that you're talking about for upgrading the train station.
Yes.
As a daily Keystone Service commuter, I'm keenly aware that far too many Amtrak trains pass right through Coatesville and don't stop. Are you getting any sort of commitment for some help between PennDOT and Amtrak to increase the frequency of stops as you upgrade the station?
Well, as part of the overall package, the study, that's part of the analysis that's being provided by DVRPC. If the ridership, they're doing ridership studies, freight studies in order to determine, of course, we want additional stops. We want to make sure that happens, but as part of the overall package and concurrently to the design and development stage, they're doing ridership surveys. So that's really the mechanism that we understand that will augment additional stops and additional service.
Okay, so this will be an incentive to them to look favorably upon adding stops?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There are also some initiatives underway currently to improve the existing train station building and to get some signage that out on Lincoln Highway that there is indeed a train station, and some additional marketing locally that the train station is there and that the Amtrak is running.
I'm going to take the opportunity as chairman, take a little prerogative to have some comments, some questions, and maybe even just a little bit of discussion or comments to my fellow members. First question on CRIS. As city manager, how important do you think that is? And I'm going to preface it with something that you need to know.
Okay.
Many times in Harrisburg, we hear comments about programs, and this is one that we always have opinions. And there is an opinion that exists in Harrisburg that this program maybe shouldn't even be funded, but certainly shouldn't be expanded. So give us some help on that. Why is that important to you?
Well, I think they've done a great, the skinny, pardon the vernacular, on the project is how well it is done in Lehigh Valley and how it's helped the Allentown, Bethlehem area. And that it would be, transferable to other urban areas like Coatesville. I know Harrisburg had discussed it at one time, but I think that it would be a great incentive program to help build our business base, would bring business back in. We could have utilization of what we have. And I'm not an expert by any means on CRIS, but I think that it would be another mechanism based on the population we could utilize. It seemed to be I don't want to say a quick fix, but it would expedite the rebirth of that region, and I thought it would be helpful as an opportunity here. I know Sonia's worked with that program in the past, and that's really one of the key discussion items whenever we talk about our redevelopment ideas. That's something that's really come up on the forefront.
Sure. I think that, yes, it did have, the neighborhood improvement zone did have a significant impact in Allentown. And I'm from York. I just spent about 6.5 years in York where we were in application for the CRIS, which is a little bit different than the NIS legislation. I think what it does, it affords us just one more tool in the arsenal that we have at our disposal to encourage and incentivize development. And I think the more tools you have, the more developers have the confidence to come in and look at your city in a different light.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next topic, but for my colleagues, the purpose of an informational hearing is to carry information both ways. And I think we just heard, at least from this city's point of view, how important that program would be. And maybe we can help stomp out that fire when we hear people say, oh, it's not a good program or whatever. Just interesting comment that you made in your presentation, Mr. Manager, about the need for the cultural aspects of the city. What has been the reaction of the community and council to the idea of carrying the cost of some of those programs on the city? You're struggling, you've got fixed dollars. One tendency would be, we're getting down to the bare bone of our budget, we're not going to do any of these. But to me, you seem to imply, at least, if not actually state, that you thought that that would accelerate the problems you were having instead of trying to stave them off. So has the community embraced that as an important part of your budget?
Well, yeah, it's also a stress part of our budget. It's an important part. We need to find a way to fund. As I mentioned in my presentation, we have, pools in the city, which for a population this size is very unusual. They don't have them anymore. They just stopped creating them as municipal facilities. But through the years, it's been a very important facility in the city. Council has been very hands-on recreational and programs for the city's youth. So that's integral. We carried that for some years with, very poor equipment, which cost us many extra dollars because of the maintenance. But we're looking at, as part of our out-of-the-box process, to try to find some partnerships to go ahead and move forward to get some of these facilities up and going quickly. So it's not just a tax requirement now. We're trying to work with these, other agencies and entities to help us fund those things. Sonia has discussed, foundation work. We have splash pads that we want to get up and going. We need that for this right away. These are emergency situations for us that we're working to find the end for.
The final comment I would make, based upon the tour I took yesterday, the information that we saw, I think those two rail projects for Downingtown and for Coatesville are key. And I hope there's a reporter in the room, because this message is going to be for reporters. The story can't always be about the bad. It's got to be, and Representative Lewis made this comment yesterday, he's very confident about what can be, and he wants to talk about the positive. That was the comment he made to me, and it struck me last night as I was relaxing and about to fall asleep how important that is. I remember traveling through Downingtown frequently with a paper mill. Now, to me, as a young man of 16 or 17, that paper mill was already an eyesore. But from a city revenue point of view, obviously jobs, tax base, now it's a real eyesore. And it's a danger. You made the same comments yesterday about the danger of all these vacant buildings to public health and safety, the burden on the tax rolls. So what we have to do is be very collective and confident in our message that the project in Coatesville and the project in Downingtown will be successful. They are the right locations. It's exactly what young people want. They don't want them out in the middle of nowhere where, I think maybe it was you, Ms. Hunsinger, talked about getting in the car and driving. They want to be able to walk to that facility, and how logical that is. And we've got to be singing out of one choir book about the confidence we have that this project will go forward. That's the only way this is going to go. So thank you for your passion and your testimony. I know I got signal we're behind schedule. I hope that hasn't.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, go ahead. Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick question.
Sure.
And I want to use my previous experience with working with Governor Rendell on the codes and implementing the UCC that was passed in '99. It took us 4 years to get it up and running. And I heard you mention it, and as the chairman indicated, a lot of us are on different committees. I'd like to know how that's impacting you, because it's something that we hear a lot. And it just real quick, because I don't want to get off subject, because we are behind.
I'll give you a real quick example. We have fire regulations, for instance, that when conversions occur in residential properties, if there's a third floor, there has to be egress. I believe there's a discrepancy in the UCC, and I hopefully, I don't know by heart, but I believe that there's a discrepancy in egress that 1 year, I believe, one of the earlier years allows for a drop ladder, for instance. And another year requires actually the installation of a fire escape. I may be getting it backwards, and I apologize if I am, but what the problem is it's you implement, the implementation years aren't the same year, so we generally have arguments with landowners that that's not the current code, this is the current code, I'm going to fight you in some form or another. So I think it's just that whether the state is behind, I understand the state doesn't adopt, if it's a 2013 code, it takes some time for the state to catch up, where if it was more expeditedly adopted, we'd be consistent across.
Yeah, well, what they do is they actually give everybody time to get certified and up their certifications, because it's even they change it one day, you can't be changing it the next, because you don't give the people that have to enforce it and your local enforcement. So it usually runs 2 to 3 years behind, depending upon the municipality. But as a municipality, I just wanted to let you know that you can make local ordinances and strengthen your code. They just have to be approved by the Department of Labor and Industry. So you can make your code more stringent. You just can't take regulation off it. And I think that's a tool that people don't know they have in their box. And it goes up through the UCC committee, and they're usually pretty good at expediting that. So you can make your local codes stronger through regulations that you adopt locally. Something the city of Philadelphia does quite often. We have some areas we're a little stronger than others, and we try to adopt it, but that's something that you could do. And thank you for your testimony. Thanks for coming today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good. We'll next recognize the Calhoun Township panel, which is Joshua Young, a commissioner, and Kristen Camp, Township Solicitor. Anytime you wish, you may proceed.
I'll go first. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, fellow citizens, City Council. My name is Josh Young, and for the last 11 years, I've been honored to serve as Commissioner for Calhoun Township. I was asked to give testimony on one aspect of Calhoun Township's revitalization efforts. Over the past few years, fellow commissioners, business leaders, and citizens have complained about boarded up and vacant buildings on Lincoln Highway as it passes through our township. After years of blaming it on recession and other issues, myself and Commissioner Cruz said, let's stop complaining and let's actually do something about it. So we established the Lincoln Highway Redevelopment Task Force. The task force included members of the business community, Planning Commission, Board of Commissioner, and fellow citizens. Our approach was threefold. First, we set out to fix our zoning codes, which our Solicitor Camp will inform you about in a minute. Second was to establish a tax incentive program, which I will testify on in a second. And our last approach has been to use the existing zoning laws to force property owners into fixing up their buildings. One example of that, in the last year, to my left, Harry Lewis's Chief of Staff is also our board president. When she was first elected, we were complaining that people would just board up the buildings and walk away. So we said we were no longer going to tolerate that. We began posting those buildings for demolition, and which in the code we would have to wait 1 year to then go to court and ask for that. Now along Lincoln Highway in Calhoun Township, much of that is in the floodplain. So if those buildings were demolished, there would be no ability for the property owner to then rebuild those buildings the way they existed today. So once we did that, we've had many people actively list those properties and actively try to sell them so that we didn't get to the process where they would be demolished. So our three-pronged approach has begun to really start to work. Today, I'll focus on our use of the Local Economic Revitalization Tax Assistance Program, or LERTA. Our task force looked at multiple different tax incentive programs and settled on LERTA for several different reasons. First, LERTA only abates taxes on the increase in assessment value after construction. For example, if a business has a building assessed at $1 million and after expansion or renovations, the building is then assessed at $2 million, the taxing authorities would abate the additional $1 million. So the existing taxing authorities would continue to get the tax on the existing million, but would be abating the new construction or renovation. LERTA also gives us the flexibility to choose the length of the program, a 5 or 10-year abatement program, along with the percentage of abatement. So if you chose the five-year, you could go with a higher percentage that the abatement would knock off every year. In Calhoun Township's case, we took a 10-year approach with a 10-year abatement that phases additional assessment at 10% a year. If you follow my previous example, that property owner would see their first year tax bill based on $1 million and could expect about a $100,000 increase to the assessed value over that 10-year period. saving the property owner about 50% in taxes on the increased value over the 10 years, which I have included our fact sheet as Exhibit A. Second reason we chose LERTA is that it only required the municipality to pass a resolution declaring the selected area as a deteriorated area, and we would require no state approvals. If you look at Exhibit B, that has that included. Our task force felt this would be the quickest way to implement an incentive program. Each taxing authority would then be required to pass an ordinance or resolution adopting the municipality's LERTA boundaries and abatement schedules, which are Exhibits C, D, and E, and that actually has a list of every single tax parcel included in the LERTA district. But this is really where we began to run into trouble, and our speedy process really hit the brakes. Township administration had met with the county and school district staff and administration to discuss our thoughts and their thoughts on LERTA. The county was extremely helpful and excited with our efforts. The Coatesville Area School District Administration was also interested in our proposal, which would increase ratables and revitalize the area. When our task force and the Chester County Economic Development Council, who had been assisting us with the process, presented the proposal to the Finance Committee of the Coatesville School District, we were met with heavy opposition from just one member. Over the next year, we attended meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting where this one board member refused to believe our numbers on growth, the premise that tax incentive programs attract businesses, and his direct quote was, "No business ever locates because of taxes." Our efforts, or that our efforts were even worthy of this program. The school board at the time refused to put the proposal up for a vote until we could satisfy this one member's requests. After a year of trying, it became evident that we would never ever satisfy this member's concerns because he just didn't believe in the premise of tax abatement. And in the end, we began to lobby single board members to try to force a vote so that we could move forward. And after a year of delaying our process, that board member ended up voting for the thing anyway. And the third reason we chose LERTA was the ease for the property owner to apply. It's simply an application, which is Exhibit F, to be included with your building permit, which is Exhibit G. And that application is sent off to the county assessment office for approval, and that's the only requirement necessary to receive the abatement, which makes it very attractive to the property owner. Cowan Township has received great press about our efforts to proactively address our commercial corridor, which is Exhibit H. The Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission has also developed a document, and they actually had a bus tour where they gave this document out, and they brought people with the Chester County Economic Development Council and drove up and down Lincoln Highway showing them properties. And I guess I want to stress how important revitalization to Lincoln Highway is. So Coatesville School District is 9 municipalities. Cowan Township is 1/3 that total assessed value. So if our business district begins to sputter and isn't moving forward, our school district continues to suffer even more. To date, we have, in my testimony I said 3, we now have 4 completed LERTA projects. We have 3 projects that will either receive approval tomorrow night, 2 of them, and 1 has already received approval. We have 2 other projects that just were in the vicinity and decided to reinvest, but we're not eligible for LERTA. And I think that was based on the aggressive stance where we took in posting those buildings for demolition. And I was briefed last night, there's possibly 4 to 5 other people talking about different projects in Cowan Township as well. So before I put this together, I asked our task force members if they had any recommendations that this committee could propose to improve the LERTA law, and everyone agreed that giving the taxing authorities a set time limit to act so that future municipalities do not have to wait a year or more for approvals. A 90 to 180 days for the taxing authorities once they receive the application to act would be we believe, more than fair enough for them to carefully study the proposal and make changes and act on that proposal. The proposal came from, the other proposal came from the school district itself, which we did incorporate into our ordinance. Under, in Exhibit C, you'll see under Section 2, subsection E, that if a property was demolished after the effective date of the ordinance, the abatement would only begin on the portion of the pre-demolition assessed value. So you can't then, after our act was passed, you can't just go demo a building and then get the vacant ground assessed value. And we felt that that was fair, and we ended up incorporating that into our ordinance so that people don't try to game the system. I understand that you did drive down Lincoln Highway yesterday, and you've seen some of the successes and some of the struggles we continue to have, and know that many men and women over the past several years have put in hundreds, if not thousands of hours to make our community better. As my representative, Representative Lewis, said earlier, this is a proud area. We helped build the 20th century. I think we can help build the 21st century, but we need both Harrisburg and Washington to help us do that. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I thank you for your time and for coming to our region, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Camp, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I am a municipal solicitor for Cowan Township. I also serve about 10 other municipalities in Chester County, Borough of Westchester. I have done some work for Spring City. I also was fortunate enough to work with the Coatesville Redevelopment Authority on the train station project, and our firm was instrumental in acquiring, I think there's 21 properties, and 18 or 19 of them have been acquired, and 2 had to go through the condemnation process, so we're still waiting for the results of that. So I am familiar very much with the city of Coatesville. As far as the LRTA statute, until Callan brought it to my attention, I didn't know it existed. I've been practicing municipal law for 20 years, and none of the municipalities that I represent or that I'm familiar with really take advantage of LRTA. I think it's difficult sometimes to get the school district on board, and as Commissioner Young indicated, it was a marketing effort and a lobbying effort. The county commissioners just wouldn't take no for an answer from the one school board member they're talking about, and it's something to take back, to your constituents and your municipalities that you're representing, is to really look into what benefits LRTA can provide. It's a very easy statute to administer. Quite honestly, some of my testimony was going to talk about the nuts and bolts of it. It's an ordinance. It's not very difficult. You pass the resolution designating the blighted area. You pass an ordinance that is almost verbatim from the state statute. There's not a lot of changes that you need to make. You get the county commissioners and the school district on board, and luckily Chester County has a great tax assessment department that's been assisting with the implementation of the program. I'm not aware of any hiccups or hurdles along the way, and I think it has incentivized some property owners. If all things being equal, you come to a municipality that has LRTA, you may choose to locate your business or redevelop your property in that district as opposed to somewhere else that doesn't offer that tax incentive. One of the things I do want to speak about, though, is, and it was mentioned before, is thinking with an open box, or having a city manager talked about, being open, having open ideas as far as zoning regulations. And that's something else that this Lincoln Highway Task Force, in addition to LRTA, another piece of the thing, another part of what they worked on was the zoning ordinance. So you're probably familiar with the state law, the Municipalities Planning Code, that authorizes municipalities to create their zoning ordinances. I think municipalities that have blight within their communities need to open that zoning ordinance. Some of the ordinances were written in 1980. Zoning ordinances have to be able to evolve with the time and with the market conditions. And Cowan Township's task force looked at their zoning ordinance and realized that it was serving as a detriment and not an incentive tool for properties that were blighted and properties that maybe were smaller, that were up against the railroad corridor here, and needed to have flexibility in how they could be redeveloped, either with what uses would be allowed or how the area and bulk standards or design regulations could be implemented. People don't realize how expensive going through a zoning process can be. If your property can't meet the rules for that particular district and you have to go get a zoning variance, typically the application is $1,500 to $2,000. Typically, you have to hire somebody like myself to go and represent you to carry the burden. So I think just keeping, in the back of your mind that if you change the zoning to incentivize blighted properties to have more flexibility and to allow the governing body to grant that flexibility within the ordinance rather than having to go through a zoning hearing process. And that's what Callan did. And we gave as one of the exhibits to my testimony was the ordinance that they passed. They created a Lincoln Highway overlay district. The underlying zoning stayed the same, but the overlay district gave additional use opportunities and more flexibility with the lot areas, the setbacks. It also gave the Board of Commissioners the ability to change parking regulations. Parking is very expensive, and sometimes developers can meet everything in the code, but they just can't provide sufficient parking. So this ordinance allows the board to modify the parking regulations if, for example, public transit's available, which it is in Callan Township. If they can have partner with their neighbor in terms of providing shared parking. And those are the types of incentives that the ordinance provides. And I think it has, as Commissioner Young, referenced, there have been 4 successful properties that have been redeveloped using both LRTA as well as the change in the zoning ordinance. They will be considering 2 tomorrow for a new recreational center along Lincoln Highway for an indoor training facility for softball and baseball, which is going to be a great asset to the community. And that gentleman, that property owner, has been a business owner in Callan for 20, 30 years and has really never had the incentive or the encouragement to redevelop a vacant piece of land. And these statutes definitely, if you speak to him, his name is Mr. Rudy, he will tell you that this incentivized him to do that. And so again, I encourage municipalities, I don't think there's any legislation that has to be enacted. The zoning ordinances are already authorized through the municipality's planning code, but the local leaders need to understand that that zoning ordinance could be dusted off and modified to allow some flexibility and incentives. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from panel members? Representative Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you today for your testimony. I want to talk a little bit more about, you said there were some hiccups, and you said to implement a 90-day period because of the one person, and we don't want to mention his or her name, or it shouldn't be just one person, but what would that 90-day do to you?
So a 90-day or 180 days would give a municipality, a deadline. Under the LRTA law right now, there is no deadline, and the taxing authority can there's no requirement to even hear the proposal. So they could just receive it and say, thank you very much, and never even hear the proposal from the municipality. They did let us talk at several meetings. We had several private meetings to try to win over that board member. The Chester County Economic Development Council had several meetings with board members. But there is no requirement that the school district or the county even consider our proposal. So just on like a land development application, there are timeframes, there are things that a municipality has to do once an application is received. I think under LRTA, it would be nice to have one even be heard because they didn't. Luckily,
so that's the change you'll be looking for us to make it mandated that if it's brought up by a municipality authority, that the county itself would at least consider the project within 90 days and respond in writing or something like that?
Well, I would say that more it's usually the school districts that are more reluctant to take up the taxing because the school district is 80%.
So LRTA mandates that, I don't want to cut you off here, I'm sorry, but LRTA mandates that the school district approves this as well? Is that what I'm hearing here?
Correct. So each taxing authority has to pass either ordinance or resolution, depending on the code. So the school district had to pass a resolution. The county and the township had to pass an ordinance approving those LRTA. Now, a municipality could do it on their own and just abate the municipality's taxes or just abate the municipality and the county. But being that the school district is 80% of that property tax, it doesn't make sense to just do 2 of the taxing authorities. But the problem is we for a year, we just spun our wheels. And there was nothing we could do to force them to hold a vote. And we believed the entire time that a majority of the school board would vote for this. But they were trying to make it seem like they were letting this member vet this process, and they yielded the floor to him for almost a year.
So, okay, so you talked about your relationship and Representative Lewis being your rep, and I'd be glad to co-sponsor something like that with Representative Lewis to move this forward. This way you can work together, because coming out of the city of Philadelphia, we have a tax abatement plan, and as a former city councilman, I was ready to expand it, because what we hear is in the news, and years ago we saw how Detroit went broke, and now Detroit is flourishing because of a plan like this, and they've already went up to 20-year tax abatements with the percentage breakdown as you do. The city of Philadelphia, we do a 10-year tax abatement, and everybody year 9 are selling their property because it's jumping. And I introduced legislation just like you did here with it, 90%, 80%. So it's a great tool to utilize, and I wanted to make that clear that everybody should utilize that percentage and bring them back on the tax rolls as fast as possible. But these are properties that are sitting dormant and not collecting nothing. And I think that's what your school district officials and all need to know. You're not getting nothing out of these. And pretty soon we'll be taking them to court to try and collect the taxes. And then there's that corporation's hidden behind 4 other corporations. You can't even find them no more. But I would be grateful if Representative Lewis and I could work on something like that. And I thank you for your testimony, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, as you stated beforehand, some of us will be leaving, and I'd like to apologize to the future testifiers that I'm unable to stay. Representative Santora and I have to vacate here right now.
Understand that.
No pun intended.
Don't apologize.
But in 10 minutes, right?
We are a little bit behind schedule. I personally don't care. I'm going to stay as long as it takes. I did want to, before we recognize Representative Lewis for a question, I wanted to acknowledge the presence of a gentleman who's been very helpful with the Urban Affairs Committee, John Cromer. The other thing I'd like to note for the audience and for the members, don't forget House Bill 613, Representative Ward is over in the Senate. That would expand LRTA to a mixed-use development project, which would be extremely helpful. Representative, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Nelson, for those comments. That was kind of what I was going with that, but I just have one question. I don't mean to put anyone on the spot. Has the improvement with the Coatesville School District, that relationship between the township, has that improved any at all, or with any of the other municipalities that you know of?
So that's a loaded question. There's many different answers to that. As far as economic development-wise, I believe the Coatesville School District realizes now that things aren't just going to get better on their own. And just sitting there, like Representative Nielsen said, just vacant buildings sitting there, they're not going to just automatically renew on their own, and that they have to take an active approach in making sure that they are a partner in revitalization too, because, like I said, 80% of their property tax value is the school district, and that's where 80% of their bill goes. So I think they've finally begun to realize that, you know, that revitalization isn't just going to happen, and it's not just the municipality's issue to deal with. It's also they can be a partner in that.
Thank you for that comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Representative Santora, I know you want one question before you have to roll.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony today. Actually, happy to report a good friend of mine, client and constituent of mine, just got approved in Calne this past week for one of his projects, so that's good news. I think the LRTA program has a lot of good benefits to it, and I agree by putting a time frame on there when it can be approved. It sets it forth in motion. Is it 90 days? Is it 6 months? Whatever it is, that's got to be worked out. I think there is improvement. Do you have, and I think you said, do you have a log of people ready to go if they can get this done, or do you think this is something that you're going to go out and promote in order to bring more development?
So through the Chester County Economic Development Council, we have worked with property owners to try to bring different types of groups. I'll give you an example of where this program had a stalled project. So Dell Toyota, which you may have passed yesterday, Sloan Toyota moved into their territory, and they were not going to upgrade their facility. They had an approved plan, and they were just going to kind of walk away from that. Once LERTA passed, and we all adopted it, that essentially took 50% off of their taxes for the new development. The bank then said, okay, this is now viable project because your tax abatement will also help with your loan payment. That project went forward, there was new investment, and between part-time and full-time, there are now 50 more employees working at that facility. So there are new projects, that people were waiting, like Ms. Camp said, that needed changes to the zoning. Then we also put on top of it, a sweetener to abate the taxes. And I think we have multiple different types of projects now on the books. We have some that were stalled and just not moving forward that now are moving. They already had approved plans, but because of the economy, because of new banking regulations, whatever it was, they just couldn't move forward, and now are. And we're actually beginning to see talk, whispers, and actually sometimes plans coming forward on new development, which will take some time to flush out through conditional use or land development process. But the ones that are already done, they were plans that were just sitting there. They were approved and had been approved for years and just never.
So you're willing to do it on spec, not necessarily an identified tenant?
Correct.
That's good.
So, we have taken an approach. Before, like Ms. Camp said, we were kind of rigid in the old plan, and we weren't willing to deviate from the old zoning. The last two boards that I have served on, we have taken a completely different approach. Bring us something, we'll evaluate it, and whatever we need to do to make sure that you get this approved, as long as it's something that the community feels is of value, then we're gonna lift mountains to make sure that these projects get approved.
Excellent, thank you.
Representative Knowles, do you still have a question?
I believe that my question may be better off not asked. I'm going to wave off.
Okay. I get it. We're going to take a 2-minute break, but I did want to make a comment to you. You are correct, Mr. Young. In my own community, they passed a LERTA provision. There was an added benefit. The community had, among the business community, the perception of being unreasonable. So that it came to be that in the business community, nobody would make any change to their building, any improvement, because they were afraid the book was going to be thrown at them, and usually it was. I'm talking about $250,000 to comply with fire and panic and ADA if you made some little change. That's not good for a community. So I compliment you on both the attitude change and then the passage of the statute, because when you pass that statute, you're telling the business community, we expect you to keep your buildings up to code, and we want to make it available for you.